Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Smith, your host, and I want to welcome you to Grief to Growth. And whether this is your first time joining us or you've been walking this path with me for a while, I am truly grateful you're here. This podcast exists to help you navigate life's toughest challenges and explore the big questions like who we are, why are we here, where do we come from, and where are we going. Today, I'm honored to welcome back to Vanessa May to the show. You may remember Vanessa from episode 255 a couple years ago. We're recording this in late 2025. And in that first episode, she shared the heartbreaking story of losing her beloved son, Harry. Well, since then, she's continued on her journey as a holistic grief coach, a certified grief educator, a nutritional therapist, a well-being coach, and a spiritual life coach, helping others move through unimaginable loss with honesty, depth, and compassion. She's also the author of 3 impactful books, including her most recent release, When Grief Takes Everything, A Survival Guide to Devastating Loss. This powerful book begins where her last book, Love Untethered, left off, navigating life not only after the loss of her son, but also the shocking successive deaths of her husband and her father during the COVID pandemic. So when we recorded the first episode, we didn't talk about the loss of her father and her husband. It was really still, frankly, very fresh to her, and we were focusing on her first book. So we'll talk about that some today as well. In this episode, Vanessa opens up about how profound and layered grief affects us emotionally, physically, and spiritually. We'll explore the impact of trauma on the body, including her own cancer diagnosis, which came 18 months after losing Harry, and how grief can manifest in illness. She also shares how she's found healing through writing, her spiritual beliefs, and the continuing bonds she maintains with Harry and Anthony, who she feels around her daily. We'll discuss how grief and soul growth are intertwined, why she believes we're in Earth School for powerful lessons, and how the intersection of grief and spirituality can offer hope, even in our darkest hours. She also introduces us to 6 other women featured in her new book, each of whom had survived devastating loss and emerged with insight and strength. Vanessa's lived experience and her refusal to offer toxic positivity or surface level comfort makes her voice one that so many people deeply resonate with. So if you've ever wanted to understand how someone survives the worst and continues to grow through it, this conversation is for you. And as always, I invite you to join the conversation over at grieftogrowth.substack.com, where I've written an article to accompany this episode where you can share your thoughts, leave comments, and connect with me and other listeners who are walking the same road. So with that, let's get into this conversation with Vanessa May. Hi, Vanessa. Welcome back.
Hi, Brian. It's lovely to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. Thanks for being here. As I mentioned, we spoke a couple of years ago. It was after we talked about the passing of your son. So for people who haven't heard that episode yet, start off tell us about Harry.
So Harry was 24 when he died. He was an amazing young man, as they all are, who die early. They just seem to be somebody who is quite special, each and every one of them. That
Hmm.
seems to be my experience because working as a holistic grief coach now, I work with a lot of bereaved parents, and all their children have something special about them. Um, and Harry was definitely one of those,
Hmm.
and he left an impact on everyone he left behind. Um, and yeah, I mean, I always say he changed. He was my first child, and he changed my life when he came in to my world, and he changed it again when he left.
Yeah.
Um, and I was, like all bereaved parents, completely devastated by his loss. And just to bring in my husband, he was also devastated, but was amazing in supporting me. He
Mm,
sort of, we were married for 30 years, and he really, because a long marriage, you have your ups and downs.
mm,
And in those last 2 years of his life, after Harry passed away, he really grew, I would say, and he was an incredible partner to me
mm.
in a way that Harry's loss changed him, and he stepped up for me, and that's something I really, really treasure.
Yeah.
Um, But just going back, yes, to Harry. So after we lost him, I really struggled with making sense of why, though I very quickly knew that he was still around me, and I just had to find him. And so I did, like lots of us, start exploring the spiritual aspect of the afterlife. I found Helping Parents Heal, your podcast. Um, and one of the things that helped me process my grief was writing. And that took the form of my first book, Love Untethered: How to Live When Your Child Dies. And it was the best therapy for me. And we spoke last time in our last chat about therapists and how the spiritual aspect is often missing with grief counseling. And I
Mm,
definitely found that. So writing for me really helped enormously. Um, then we went into the pandemic, um, and that was very weird for people who had recently lost someone, or particularly a child, because already you feel quite isolated, and then the world around you panicking, and you're kind of going, yeah, we've been through the worst. This doesn't really, make much difference to us. Of course,
mm,
it did in many ways.
mm,
And I was much more concerned about, my elderly mum and her not getting ill. Um, Also in that time, I got a cancer diagnosis, which maybe we'll come back to if we talk about the physical aspects of grief, which I'm quite, hot on.
mm,
But but yeah, so my husband was amazing, and he was incredibly supportive, and he was my rock, and we lent on each other, and we helped each other through. And then he and I and my daughter all went down with COVID, and we all had different versions of it, it felt like. My daughter, being younger, wasn't so affected. I had it pretty badly, but my husband really, really took it badly, to the
mm,
point where um, he had to go to hospital. And then he was released. He came home and he got ill again. And he had to go back in. And of course, it was a time when I was ill anyway, so they wouldn't let anyone who had COVID into a hospital.
mm,
But anyway, you just couldn't go on a COVID ward. So he was sort of, it was the most horrible feeling. I felt so ill. At one point, I thought I might be going into, I thought I might die from this.
mm,
Little did I know, because I thought my husband was in there and he'd get well. So we had to communicate over WhatsApp. That was the only way we could communicate. And he was in there for 2.5 weeks. I never ever thought that he wouldn't get better.
mm,
And and I was constantly trying to talk to the doctors, it was like walking through treacle, trying to just get myself well, to communicate with the hospital, not being able to see him. And then we got the call that he wasn't going to make it.
mm,
And they said, you can come in and say goodbye, because at that stage of the pandemic they were letting relatives say goodbye. Meanwhile, whilst it was literally, as we got ill, the day before we got ill, my dad had died.
oh, wow.
I couldn't go to his funeral because I had COVID. I write about all this in When Grief Takes Everything, but it is quite, it felt so unreal.
I'm sure.
And, we think, particularly if we've had a terrible, terrible loss of a child, we think, well, nothing but, lightning, people would say lightning doesn't strike twice.
Right.
And I'm here to say, sadly, for some of us, it does. And, but I was very much in survival mode because I was ill myself. So I was physically on the back foot.
Hmm.
I was still grieving Harry. I still had a diagnosis of PTSD. So I had all that to contend with. My dad's just died. And then I called and we had to wear all this PPE equipment, and we had to wear gowns, masks, hairnet, gloves, all that was, I mean, I don't know what it was like in the States, but that's what we were doing over here.
Yeah.
And I had to go in and say goodbye with my daughter. And it was absolutely unbearable and unbelievable. But what I will say is that I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to Harry. So I was very conscious that I could now say goodbye and I could thank him for
Mm.
being there for me and how amazing he was in looking after me. And so it did feel like a privilege to hand him over to Harry. And that's what I knew was going to happen.
Mhm.
And I felt very jealous because he was going to be reunited with Harry,
Yeah.
and I was going to be left behind. Um, so we got to say everything we wanted to say. I got to say, yeah. I mean, it's a long time to be married, and I didn't have much adult life before I met him, so it felt like it was enormous. And again, it was I was blindsided really in a different way this time. So yeah, that's
Yeah. And your book is titled appropriately "When Grief Takes Everything," because I would imagine that's how you felt. The
yeah,
just and as you said, people say, "Well, lightning can't strike twice," and my daughter's passed away, so I know that. But then, you think like, well, I've had my bad thing, right? I should be good for a while. I shouldn't have to go through anything else right now.
exactly. And I think when I got cancer, I was just like, well, that's not fair.
Right. Right.
Um, but that felt like nothing compared to losing Harry, and it also paled compared to losing my husband. And we were so unprepared. And the difference between losing a child and losing your husband is that when your partner dies, and if they're not really prepared, you don't, we had, I mean, he just left everything to me. So that,
Hmm.
but aside from that, the practicalities of what you have to do.
Hmm.
And because of those 2 years where he'd sort of taken over everything while I fell apart, so I didn't even know who we paid, our bills to, who the car insurance was with, when this was due, when that was due. The
Hmm.
practicalities, were enormous. And I was recovering from COVID.
Hmm.
Um, it was absolutely huge. So the whole, as that if any, widows and widowers are listening and you're not prepared and you don't think it's coming, there's an awful lot of what they call sadmin, where it's just admin. You've got to do their tax returns. It was more complex in that aspect than it was for Harry. But whatever, had to be sorted for Harry, Anthony had done for both of us. So
Yeah.
now it was just down to me. So it was a lot. But I do feel he probably died of a broken heart. That's what I think. Not all bereaved parents obviously do. We're still here,
Hmm.
but I think a lot of bereaved parents, the body keeps the score. And I think, yeah. And they say the lungs are in Chinese medicine are the organ of grief. And of course, COVID affects the lungs.
Right.
So, because of the way I look at health holistically,
Hmm.
that's how I thought, well, my cancer was the trauma that had at a cellular level done some damage in my body and with my husband.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That
that,
makes absolute sense. And there is a thing. the broken heart syndrome, and it doesn't
Yes.
necessarily just affect the heart. I love what you said about the trauma goes into the body. I was telling you, I think before we started recording, I have a good friend who just passed away suddenly in April, and of a heart attack. And I was with his wife at the hospital and was driving her home, and she said, my chest hurts, and I was like, well, yeah, of course, because you're going through this traumatic thing. And turns out she had a heart attack the same day that her husband did. No, she survived it.
Wow.
She's fine and recovered now. But that trauma can affect us in different ways. And I've talked to other parents who have lost children, and then one or the other parent will die. Not too long afterwards from something like like you said, that the grief can affect our lungs even.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in the book, I mean, I've got the book here. I don't know if I can quickly find it, but I write an awful lot about because I did lots of. I'm not going to be able to find it, but lots of research into the statistics of
Hmm.
how and particularly widows actually it's something I'm not remembering it correctly probably but it's something like 55% increase in having a heart attack
Hmm.
after you've lost your partner, obviously bereaved parents as well,
Hmm.
and broken heart syndrome being a real thing. So it is extraordinary, and I think it's extraordinary because most people don't really realize how grief affects us and how trauma, because it's also the trauma and the shock
Right.
as well.
Right.
Um, but because you and I have this spiritual belief, we also probably believe that you don't go until it's your time anyway. So we sort of have to factor that in. Yes, grief does things to your body, but I'm still standing and my
Right.
husband isn't. So there is some kind of soul path that we're perhaps not fully, knowing um at this stage as to I've still got things to do and that's why I've stayed. I don't know. But even though on a practical level and a scientific level can look at what trauma and grief does to the body and there's science and statistics about it, I also look at it from the spiritual perspective, which is
Hmm.
like, well, you don't go unless it's your time. I
Yeah.
don't think, but
I truly believe that also, and I also believe all these emotions, these feelings that enter the body. That I love this word I heard the other day. I can't remember who to give credit to, but they said we have to metabolize our emotions, and I really like that image
mm,
of those emotions, the pain, the anger, the fear, the guilt, all those things that come. We have to face them, and we can metabolize them, we can dissolve them, we can transform them, so we can let them stay in the body, and they can take us down, or we can do what you have done and take that and transform it, and now you're out, helping others, and as you said, you're still standing. And I'm also a true believer that we go when it's our time. um, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know I've talked to a lot of parents when a child passes. I wanted to go with my daughter. I was like, I'm ready to go. So I've heard
yeah,
so many parents say that.
definitely. And honestly, I really felt jealous that my husband was going to be with my son.
Sure. Yeah.
I have a daughter, so I had a reason to stay. But sometimes the logic of that doesn't come into it. You just have a sort of need to go with them. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
but we're not meant to for whatever reason. But I did feel very real jealousy that he was
Hmm.
going and I wasn't, and that he was out of pain,
Yeah.
out of suffering, because I thought you've only grieved for 2 years. I'm
Yeah.
going to I'm now grieving for both of you
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
my dad. My dad was elderly, which is why it's not quite the same. But,
Right.
it's still a loss upon a loss upon a loss,
Hmm.
and very close together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's,
in terms of that loss upon a loss upon a loss, because the thing about grief is, it is exhausting.
mm,
We have to work to process through it. I can only imagine that you're still grieving your son at this point. I mean, that's still early grief. I call it
oh, yeah.
at 2 years. That's still early. How did you handle? now Anthony is going, and now you're dealing with both of these things at the same time.
I don't know. You can read the book and you'll find out. I mean, I literally because I sometimes I as I was editing it, I was thinking I can't believe I've survived this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As I say, there was a lot of practical things that all fell on me to
Mm-hmm.
do. So you get caught up when you lose a partner in the practicalities of what you have to do. So that slightly delays your grief.
Right.
But of course, and financially, that I had to go back to work. I was now a widow.
Mm-hmm.
So after Harry died, I stopped working for 10 months, I think. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
like I was like, I have no choice. I have to go back to work. So that was enormous as well. I literally would drag myself out of bed and have to just pretend and focus on something else. And in one way, it was very good for me, but it was exhausting. I don't know how I survived. I think what happens when you have multiple losses is that your grieving gets extended
Yeah.
and you you don't at first I didn't know who I was grieving. It
Right.
all got muddled up. And I was used to feeling Harry. And then I got really worried about, I don't know, I can't feel Anthony around me. And I went to a medium and she said, don't worry. When you feel Harry, you're feeling Anthony because they're together
Hmm.
and they're so close to you. And that was an enormous comfort because I was also trying to navigate that side of things
Mm-hmm.
and make sense of it and why I'd lost them both. Um, yeah, but it still is. It's still incredibly difficult to navigate this, I find. Um, and the ways I do it are one, because I have a purpose, and that's to help others.
Mm-hmm.
And just actually, I want to say, going back to what we were saying about the physical manifestations of grief. Currently, I've got a bereaved father and a bereaved mother with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's quite, and lots of them have all kinds of physical ailments that just only happened since they've lost someone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yes, so I've got this mind, body, spirit approach that I use with clients, and I like to think that I'm helping them and giving them what, we didn't get from grief counselors early on who couldn't possibly understand what we were going through. So, um, yeah, I'm that's giving me a purpose and also just my spiritual belief and believing they're around me and that I'll be with them again and that it's not my time yet, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand what you're saying. So, we talked about like planning, soul purpose. We talked about Harry, and we talked about it before in our earlier
Mm.
conversation that there's something about kids that go early that they just seem to be they live life differently and they're perceived in the world differently. So you're when Harry went, I guess you started saying, okay, well this is his time and this he was early. When Anthony then transitioned, I would imagine you saying to your spirit guides, your higher self, whatever, like, what's the deal with this plan?
Yeah. So sort of conclusion I've come to is that, and again, I write about it in the book.
Hmm.
I I think this part of my journey is just for me to do it on my own.
Hmm.
So my daughter now doesn't live at home. So I have gone from quite quickly at the family home being really busy and, lots of life and activity. I'm still in the family home and it's just me.
Hmm.
I might move eventually, and so it feels that so I try and look at it as what's the lesson in this? This
Right.
is about me just figuring this out, this part of the, because when you're a parent, you know what it's like. You're looking after others. You're feeding them. You're multitasking. You're fixing. You're
Hmm.
doing what parents do. Um, and I'd been with my husband for 30 years, so that was kind of like suddenly I'm on my own.
Hmm.
It's very difficult. Yeah, it's a lot. It's still a lot. I'm used to it now.
Yeah.
Because it's just coming up to 4 years since Anthony died and six since Harry died.
Mm.
But I may be used to it, but I don't like it. But I'm trying to accept it because, as we know, acceptance is an important part of because if we can't change something, we sort of have to surrender to it. So I talk about surrender in the book as well. Just surrendering to the fact that this has happened.
Yeah.
you know, I've just got to navigate my way through. And of course, I try and think, why has this happened to me? Was I a mass murderer in a past life? And of course, joking aside, I I've taken on a lot in this lifetime.
Right.
And I think we said this last time, you kind of think, well, your soul's over on the other side. You're having a conversation with your soul family, and you're going, okay, let's go in and do this. And you go, this will speed up our soul growth, and you're not in your human mind, you're in your soul essence, and so you think you can do it all. And I seriously bit off more than I could chew. I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, I really don't know what I was thinking, except you're not thinking as a human. And who knows? I mean, we know that it'll make sense eventually. We'll go to the other side, and we'll understand, and we'll go, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
But it's a lot, and as you said, I don't, and I do think it's important to, meet people where they are, and particularly people in early grief. They don't want to be taught. They want you to say, this is terrible. It really is terrible. And then give them ways and help them find a purpose and help them find a spiritual connection if that's what's, for them.
Hmm.
But I do think what's happened to me is terrible, and I am still very traumatized, and I have had loads of EMDR, and I still can very quickly go into fight or flight. It's not straightforward. So I
Hmm.
don't want to sort of sit here and give everyone the impression that, because yeah, it's tough. It's really tough.
And yes, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that. You used the word there, surrender, which for a lot of people is a dirty word, especially here in America, because we're taught to be tough and to fight and to push through everything. But surrendering, I love it's accepting what I tell people. It doesn't mean giving up. It's accepting what a reality is, and that's can be a very difficult thing when you lose someone so close to you. It can be like you said, it can be surreal sometimes. It's been 10 years since my daughter passed away, and every once in a while, I'll still think that this really happened. That, this is something that really happened in our lives. So it isn't a straightforward path. It is that back and forth.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and when you're like you are as well, when we're working with people in early grief, we hear all the fighting against what happened. This wasn't meant to happen. People say, this wasn't meant to happen to me. This wasn't
Right.
meant to happen to my family. And when you're further down the line, yeah, we all thought that.
Hmm.
And it's helping them to get to a point where they can go, well, it has.
Yes, and that's a really good point. I really want to kind of hone in on because the idea of soul planning, and we go when it's our time. Some people might say, "Well, I don't believe in that stuff," or prove it to me, and I can't prove it to you. But what we can do, what we will do, is we have to find meaning or make meaning, and that's what you've done. You said, okay, this has happened. This is where I am. This is what I'm going to do. You're making meaning out of this. Whether you believe in soul playing or not, and I do, but for people that don't, you still have to find a way to move forward.
Yeah, you do. But that's where I think the continuing bonds theory is good, isn't it? And when I working with clients who don't have a spiritual belief, I'll say you can still continue your bond. You're still their mother, that's still your daughter. That so that you can find other ways to help them keep the connection.
Sure.
The death ends a life, not a relationship. It doesn't have to be spiritual, but I think the people who do develop a spiritual connection or find it or explore it tend to do slightly better, maybe. But what I have learned, and since writing Love Untethered, is that I now realize there are so many things that come along to complicate your grief. The layers. I mean, we could call them secondary losses,
Hmm.
but in my case, additional actual losses. But
Hmm.
all kinds of things come into play, like illness, like mental health, all kinds of things. Family dynamics change. The family changes.
Hmm.
Um, in my case, my daughter and I lost half our family,
Right.
and it's there's huge things that come along. It's not just, oh, I lost my son.
Right. Yeah, and you talked about it earlier, and it's really important for people to understand. Every loss is different. Literally every loss. And but losing, I remember one time I was talking to a woman. This was several years ago. I was being interviewed for a podcast, and I slipped up and I said, "Losing a child is the worst thing that could ever happen," because we really shouldn't compare losses. But I said that, and she had lost a son, and she had just lost her spouse, and she goes,
Mhm.
what you just said isn't true because when you lose a spouse, there's all these other complications that we don't have any idea about till we go through it. All the
Yeah,
little things like where are the bills? You know, Here it's like, does the house automatically go to the other spouse? Your accounts, where do they go? It can get really complicated. So you're trying to deal with this shocking loss anyway, and then people are asking you, putting papers in front of you, asking you to make decisions and sign this and do that.
yeah. It's Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to say earlier, is that
Hmm.
it's a different experience losing
Yeah,
your child. And I kind of, having had, and again, everyone is going to feel very differently. I feel they're both terrible,
yeah,
but
yeah,
there's nothing like having your child, that's a primal bond.
yeah,
That's but it doesn't really matter they're both terrible, and I'll tell you the biggest issue is they're terrible together. you know I haven't
yeah.
got one or the other. I've
Right,
got both. This woman had both. That's the complicating issue. It's
right,
like it's so compounded. It's double the loss, double the trauma.
right.
It just is. Well, that's my experience anyway. But I find what's quite interesting as well is that people assume that because I've lost a child, being a widow is probably just a little bit more painful. It's, and I'm going, yeah, but because I've lost my son, it's so much worse. It feels so
Yeah,
much harder.
right.
But other people always have a sort of opinion, whether it's voiced or not. You sort of sense that they think the loss of a child just must be so much worse. And I think, yeah, but it's natural we compare losses and
It is, and I don't know why we do it, but it is. And the
I
thing
don't
is,
know.
I try to avoid it because as I said, everyone's different, and they also they're compounding. So it's not like when you have one, the other one goes away. When you've lost your son, and you've lost your husband, now you're dealing with both of those things, and
Mm.
it changes everything about your life. You said now you're living in the house by yourself. It changes the holidays. It changes,
Yeah,
vacations.
absolutely. I mean, that's such a good point. One of the things that we did a lot after Harry passed away was we went away a lot
Hmm.
because it gave us some respite. Well, I've tried to do that. It's not the same. So I've lost that respite.
Yeah.
Um, it's very lonely being a widow. And I have a theory, again, coming personally and also from my work, is that although it's terrible to be a young widow, and they don't see it this way, but they do tend to be more likely to meet someone else and start again, although they'll never. I've got one of the women I write about in my book. She loses her partner, and I'm not taking away the devastation of that at all. And then if you're elderly, which of course is the most common thing, you lose a spouse. well, you haven't really got long to go. And sometimes elderly people are just living in the now, trying to kind of cope with day-to-day stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but I think being a widow in the middle years is really tough because I personally, well, because I've got a lot of baggage, but I really don't want to start again. But
Hmm.
I may have some years on my own. So I think that's a really tough time to be widowed in your 50s,
Yeah.
60s. I think
Yeah.
it's a really tough time. So again, being a widow isn't the same at every age. Yeah, everything is, all grief, as we know, is unique to us and our
Right.
particular situations, circumstances, etc.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, because again, whether we choose to partner or not, if we're widowed or widower, then that means we have chosen to partner. And if I remember, my grandmother was pretty elderly, seemed like to me anyway. Now I think not anymore because I'm almost her age. But when my grandfather passed, at that age, you're just kind of like, well, I'm not interested in another romantic relationship because
Mm.
I've only got a couple more, a few more years. But if you're in those middle years, now you're like, you've never thought about being with anyone else, right? And now you've got to make that decision. And then people outside are saying, well, oh, you could find somebody else, and I know, like, a lot of people are like, I can't even think about that right now.
No, no. And I think that's even more so for me because I've also lost my child and it's just too no. And that's why I go back to I think my path is about finding my but it's being on my own and making my peace with that. But
Hmm.
it is difficult and it is lonely. And loneliness again is something that perhaps is one of my lessons. I don't remember being on my own in my whole life,
Right.
You know what it's like. You're in a family, then you're
Hmm.
with, sharing a flat or apartment with someone, then you meet your partner and you're just not on your own. I have not really been on my own in my life. So
Hmm.
this is all very new and very sudden, and I was thrown into it having, as a bereaved mother, and then as a widow. It's like, whoa, this is a lot. So this is, and that's what I always tell my clients, a lot of stuff takes time to work through. And, I've really gone off the word resilience
Hmm.
because I feel it can be a bit of a stick to beat someone with if you don't feel resilient. And again, I write about this in When
Hmm.
Grief Takes Everything because I don't feel very resilient. I'm just doing my best. Whereas I think after Harry died, I was quite believing in the word resilience and thinking
Hmm.
it was important. Now I'm like, you know what?
Yeah, I thank you for saying that because people will say that to you and they think it's a compliment. You're doing great. You're so resilient. You're so strong. And I know when I would hear that, it would like make me feel almost deflated because it's like
Yeah,
I don't feel strong. It's like I'm just doing what I have to do, and I frankly don't even want to do this. Okay, but I'm just doing what I have to do. And so I want people to understand that when you see someone out and they're functioning, they're in society, they're at a party or they're whatever, and you're like, oh, you seem to be doing so great. You're not seeing what it's like when they go home at night and lay their head on the
yeah.
pillow by themselves again.
Yeah, I often think that, when you see interviews on television and they're interviewing a bereaved parent who's found some purpose or set up a foundation or something,
Hmm.
and the interview goes, well, you are, a beacon of hope. You're, demonstrating that you can get over this, or they'll say something and it's so jarring. And you think, yeah, she's just come on television and she's put on her makeup and her hair and she's just sitting there and she's speaking about her foundation. As bereaved parents, we know that behind that, she's going home and she's sad.
Hmm.
So society, sometimes I sometimes think we don't always do ourselves a lot of favors by pretending and allowing people to think that we're doing better as a group than perhaps we are. I'm all for honesty and showing how we are trying to make our way through this, but
Hmm.
also acknowledging. that, yeah, I'm not always great. I'm smiling, but I might not be later, and I wasn't yesterday. I
Yeah.
just want to be realistic about grief. Yes, I have a spiritual belief. I know my husband and son around me. It's great. However, I'm on Earth in Earth School doing this for a reason. So it's not all love and light, for
Yeah.
me. That
Yeah. Well,
that's
let's talk
my
about the concept of Earth School because I know that's an important concept to you, and it is to me as well. So, how do you view our time here, our roles here?
Well, as we sort of touched on, I guess I've sort of brought into the idea that we come and we choose certain lessons to help our soul growth, and that in our relationships we sort of play certain roles for each other to accelerate that learning, and that we've been around the block with them many times before, and what's that book called? Journey of Souls. I really love that book.
I know.
And yeah, that's kind of what I believe. There's Anna in one of the six women. She writes really well about how to survive the suicide of her son. She sort of very much went to the spiritual life.
Mm,
And that sort of uplifted her and saved her. And then she realized, I can't be there because I'm on earth. I've got to do earth, I've got to do life. And I think that's a very good point because we can almost escape into the spiritual,
hmm
but we've still got to go to work, pay the bills, interact with people, you know, navigate life. And that's what we're here to learn. And I think that's something in the spiritual sort of side of grief that slightly gets overlooked. Yeah, but we are here to be on earth and do earthly things.
Yeah, I think that's a really really good point. I remember when I was young, I was at church and stuff, and they were talking about like all your purpose in life, and I thought, well, maybe I should just become a go become a missionary, or you have some people that go so far as to become they go live in cloisters, they become monks, or they become
Mm,
stuff like that. And I don't think, and not to belittle that path, but it's not certainly the path for most of us because we are here to get our hands dirty. We are here to feel the
yeah,
emotions, and so I see people sometimes that they'll say, and I don't want to call anybody out in particular, but there's a person I was doing an interview with on a podcast, and she said, I just don't understand grief. I don't understand why people grieve at all. Why are people sad? If everybody knew what I know, then we would never grieve somebody. And I wanted to say, I don't think you've lost a child, and I know your husband's still here. Come back and talk to me when that has happened to you.
yeah,
Because we are meant to feel these emotions, the emotions that you and I still feel, even though we have these spiritual beliefs.
yeah. Yeah, you're so right. That must have been infuriating, or were you really calm and zen about it? Because I think that would have annoyed me. Because people do think yeah, grief is very different if, say, all you've lost is an elderly parent, which I have also
hmm
done in the mix. It's so different, and yeah, and it does help us, but it's yeah, the grief is the biggest learning curve, I think, grief for a significant person in your life. Let's put it that way. Not that
hmm
parents aren't significant, they are. But at the moment, I mean, they say that grief is harder when the difference is the people you live with, because that's
Yes.
where you
Right.
notice it.
Right.
Um, so yeah, husband, children, whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think you were hitting on this. Grief is the one. It's like our biggest teacher. And I was talking to
yeah,
someone the other day, and they said, I don't think we could learn without grief. And because if you extend grief to not just losing a person, but health, losing a
yeah,
job, all the disappointments of life,
yeah.
that's what we learn from. And if we set ourselves up with this spiritual bypass, as I call it, where it's like
Hmm.
I'm just a being of light and it's all going to be okay in the end, then I don't think we're doing what we're sent here to do because we're not learning from the grief because we're not actually experiencing it.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah. But you see, this is what we're learning as we go along and we're further along our grief journey, where
Yes,
these
yes,
things,
right.
maybe we wouldn't have said that if we were 2 years in.
Ex
Where,
exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. And another thing, and you touched on this earlier, I just want to reemphasize it. The stuff we're talking about, you don't say this to someone who's just lost their husband. You don't walk up to them and say, it's going to be okay because you planned all this and, and he's waiting for you. That is not helpful.
yeah. Yeah, soon after Harry died, I went and had a Reiki session, and this Reiki practitioner said, "Well, we've all lost children in past lives." And I was like, okay. Yeah, there's some things you can't say to people in early grief, spiritually or otherwise,
Yeah.
yeah. But yes, people do say the most extraordinary things, don't they? But yeah,
So you mentioned, I know in your book, it's your own experience, of course, but you also have six women. You mentioned one of the women. Tell
yeah.
us about some more about some of the other women in the book.
Yeah, so the book is structured. The first section is my story. So it picks up from literally as Anthony's death, really,
Mm,
and navigating all the things we've just talked about. The practicalities, how I felt, falling apart, etc.
hmm
And then the third section is divided into mind, body, and spirit. So it's the emotional impact of grief, and it says practical advice. So because of what you and I do, helping others, we don't just have our own experience. We learn from others, which is an amazing honor that we learn more about grief from other people as well as our own experience. So I write about the emotional impact, the physical impacts we've just touched on, and the spiritual, and how that's the bit that can really propel you forward. And then in the middle, I've got the stories of six women because I thought I don't want it just to be about me and my story. So I have got four bereaved mothers. I've got a bereaved mother and a widow.
mm,
I've got and a widow who hasn't lost a child. And then I've got somebody who's had lots of multiple losses. Um, and it was really interesting because when I chose them, I didn't know there'd be this commonality throughout, which
mm,
is exactly what I was trying to say, and really is the theme of the book, that two things can carry you through the most devastating losses, and that's finding a purpose, helping others,
mm.
and a spiritual belief. So every single one of them has a spiritual belief in the afterlife. The soul lives on to some degree or other, some more than others. And everyone has found a way to help others. And that's been part of their healing journey. So, it's that post-traumatic growth thing,
hmm
and how helping others can, yeah, get you through this. So there is a thread through all of us, which is quite nice. But as I say, I didn't just want it to be my story. I want it to be other. They are all women, as it turns out.
hmm
But they're all sharing their story honestly, without spiritual bias, bypassing, without toxic positivity, and offering some hope, but being, raw and gritty with it and not sugarcoating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I think finding that balance is really important between the spiritual bypassing, the toxic positivity, and then just this life sucks and there's no purpose to it. It's finding that balance and being able to live in that tension. That and
Yes,
and again I
it's a
appreciate you.
tension.
Yeah. So where you are today, Vanessa, what's I understand that Harry's one of your guides. Is that true?
Yeah, I
So
think so. I've been told he is,
yeah.
and I feel he is. And sometimes in sessions I'll be working with another bereaved mother, and I just feel he's with their child. And if
hmm
I feel that, the client is open to it, I might say, well, maybe our boys are here and they're having a bit of a chat as we are. And
hmm
yeah, I just feel he's with me and Anthony as well, but a different, I mean, I don't know if you feel this about your daughter, but how I perceive Harry now is the essence of who he was as a human being in this lifetime, but also he feels quite different and quite elevated now,
Hmm.
if that
Hmm.
makes sense to you. I imagine it probably does.
Yeah.
And my husband too, but particularly Harry, I feel he's, well, obviously they do understand everything. They do see the bigger picture. But yeah, I do feel him guiding me.
Hmm.
Definitely. I don't know if you feel that with your daughter as well.
I do. And, it's interesting because I always try to resolve these different paradoxes or different things we hear. One is that when we cross back over, we're still the same person that we were when we're here. The other is that, we are much more enlightened. And I think what it is our perspective shifts. I mean, it's like your eyes are open and you see all the things you forget when you come here. So the
Mm.
way I look at it is when we're here, we're at a very limited version of our bigger self. So our children have been released from these physical confines, I say our children, you and I.
Hmm.
So they are, I guess in a way wiser than we are, have access to a different body of information. I'll never forget my cousin, who's a couple years older than I am, after my daughter passed away, said, "Well, Shane is one of your ancestors now." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, yeah, because and I'm like, yeah, I guess so. So in a way, yeah, I do believe that Shayna's one of my guides. I blame Shayna for this soul plan. I could see it. This was her idea. So yeah, I think, and I know that I will see her again. Stuff we talked about.
Yeah. Yes, when you say you blame her, I also think it's okay to be angry with them. Sometimes I shout at Harry and Anthony and I
Hmm.
swear at them and how tell them off for leaving me,
Yeah.
and for just leaving me in this while they're swanning around wherever they are in
Yeah.
bliss. I'm like, how dare you leave me here? I don't think that's unhealthy, and obviously you need to have a bit of a rant and vent, and then you
Yes.
kind of calm down and go, okay, well,
It
that's
and,
a
and
bit
I
silly.
yeah, it's okay. And I tell people because the thing is, and I was jokingly saying that, but people do sometimes have anger in the case, especially of like
Mm.
suicides or
Yeah.
drug deaths and stuff like that. Sometimes people will be angry at their, but they feel like I can't express that because I don't want to hurt their feelings. It's like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to say it. It sucks to be here. And this is a story, but when Shayna, the week before she passed away, she and her mother were at a volleyball tournament. Shayna played volleyball, and she was in Florida. It was at this resort, and Shayna's driving around the kids. She wasn't even old enough to drive. They were driving around in golf carts on the resort, and she's ordering smoothies every day, and because her mother lets her do all this stuff. And I remember her mother saying, because I would talk to her mother, but Shayna never got on the phone. And Shayna, my mother says to her, Shayna, don't you feel guilty like doing all this stuff while Brian and Kayla are back at home and you're having a good time? And Shayna said, no, I don't feel guilty at all. I'll see them when I get home. And that's how I picture Shayna right now going, yeah, I'm having a good time, but I'll see him when he gets here.
Yes. Yes. That's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I think,
we'll see them when we get there.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's the way they see it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so there is a little bit of jealousy. I can see you saying, when Anthony got to see him first, because I'm like I'm older than my wife and I'm a male, so I'm like I'm not going to live as long as you, so I'll be there with Shayna first. But we never know how things are going to work
Well,
out.
we don't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just don't know, and that is what I've been shown is you simply don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. You just don't know, and that is the other thing I suppose I've learned is just accepting that you can't control anything. You can't be sure of anything in terms of say security. I mean, I think one thing I suppose I've really struggled with is a lack of safe, feeling unsafe in the world. That's the
Hmm.
trauma aspect. But we do have. That's what I work towards is going, okay. I have to just get comfortable with not knowing how life is going to go. I have
Yeah.
to accept that I've had shock upon shock and I didn't see it coming and it's the ground beneath me I mean, that's another thing I describe what happened to me. It's like, Harry dies, I'm knocked down like a hurricane, I'm knocked down.
Right.
And Anthony holds his hand out and we walk together. And then I'm knocked down again. And then there's no one to hold their
Mm,
hand out to me.
mhm.
And that's my thing of going on by myself. But it is that feeling of just accepting that we know, even if we take it away from grief and we just look at the state of the world, which we won't go into, but you know, God knows how things are going to pan out. It's a very, I suppose I'm talking about, yeah, security in an insecure, the world is insecure, grief makes us feel insecure, and it's just accepting, yeah, that's how it is
That's a
in our school.
that's a really, really good point. As from the time I was a little kid, I was like, I want to know what the right answer is, how things are going to
Mm,
turn out. That's why I became an engineer, because I'm just like
yeah,
I like engineering because it's definite. But the older I get, the more I realize we have to live with uncertainty. We can have this illusion of what we think is going to happen. And I was realizing this morning, I've known this for a long time. I'm a catastrophizer. I always think that everything is going to be the worst. So whatever happens, it's like I take it to the nth degree. But the one thing about, having my daughter pass away is it's really made me realize that I don't really have control over anything, and I need to get comfortable with that. And I'm getting more comfortable with that, because she was on vacation, so she was away. This is the week before she passed, and I'm like, okay, she's away, and they're flying, and it's like, oh. And then when their flight landed, she and her mother got home. I was like, okay, great, now they're here. But my other daughter was going away on vacation. Like Shayna came in and Kayla went out, so now I'm worried about Kayla. And then Shayna passed away in her bed, like right down the hall from me in the house.
yeah,
And that's when I realized we don't have control over
yeah.
anything. Um, so
Yeah, and
that's,
you becoming an engineer is yeah, doing something that's very logical, very
yeah,
left brain. Is it left brain, right? Yeah, yeah, very yes. And then for you, with that sort of approach to life, having everything ripped away, is yeah, but very much part of the lesson that you probably have set up for yourself.
e-
You know,
exactly. So the thing is, the ironic thing is, I realize now, because the other side of that, because we keep talking about these different tensions, right? So there's the fact I can't control anything, literally anything, but there's also this trust that everything is going to be okay.
yes,
And
yeah,
that's what's hard for, like, again, this my left brain to get around. It's like, but whatever happens, it's okay.
yeah, yes. And if we get our heads around the fact that we've had many, 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 many lifetimes, and this is one of many, and they're looking down and going, "Oh, don't sweat this
Yeah.
because it's nothing. You've just chosen to learn this, and then there's the whole thing of all lifetimes are happening simultaneously, which is very difficult to get your head around. But in the grand scheme of things, it's yeah, and we'll they say that 70% of our soul remains
Hmm.
in the spirit world. So that 30% is here, and yet we're acting like it's the biggest deal because it feels, and we're meant to think it is.
Right.
But if 70%, if that's right, who knows? 70% of our soul is in the spirit world. Well, we're with our loved ones, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and this is just a small, but it's human nature to struggle with that concept, you know.
Hmm.
It is natural that we really find that very difficult to get our heads around. Yeah, but as you say, in the end, we go home,
Hmm. Yeah.
and
Well, that's it's probably I have lots of favorite quotes. One of my favorite quotes is John Lennon, and he says, "Everything will be okay in the end, and if everything is not okay, it's not the end." And so
yeah,
I just repeat, that's on repeat throughout my life. And I think of all the things that I've gone through and all the things I thought were, this is the end. This is, when I lost a job or when I got divorced or, all those things I thought was the worst thing ever. And I realized it does work out. And so our souls present us with these opportunities, like, the passing of your son and your husband and stuff. And again, this is not to say we're not at the end, right? But you have to go through this, but you will get there. You will cross that finish line and you will see them again. And that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, yeah, we will be together again. We will find out what it's all about. And your engineer brain and my brain just, that seeking brain of wanting to know why. What's this all about? Why has this happened? I want to make sense of it. I want to see the bigger picture. And we get glimpses of it now because of what we've gone through. It's has accelerated our learning,
Hmm.
perhaps. Or else, there is the possibility that when you're dead, and that will be the end of it. But because we don't think that's a possibility, one day it will all be clear. And we'll go, oh, okay. I didn't need to get in such a state about that, particularly the relatively more minor things that we fret about in life. But that is part of the human experience, and we're here for all of it.
Hmm.
It's not always easy. You said about your John Lennon quote, the quote that I have been using as my mantra in recent months is a Buddhist quote, I think, and it's hold it loosely, hold it lightly, hold it with love.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel like I am, what we're talking about, I'm holding it quite tightly.
Right.
And it's
Right.
just like loosen your grip, hold it with love. In the end, it will all be revealed.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
perfect. I love that. And I think that's a great way to wrap up because it's that's what we've been talking about this whole time, right? It's not people talk about the idea of unattachment. We're Buddhism is like you're not supposed to be attached to anything, which means you wouldn't love, or because love is
Yeah, that
attachment.
doesn't work for me.
Doesn't work. Yeah, and I think I think that's a misunderstanding of the Buddhist concept actually.
Mm,
But yeah, we are meant to love. So we are meant to hold, but we have to hold loosely and we have to be willing to let go of things as they slip away, at least for a while.
yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Vanessa, thanks so much for being here again today. Remind people of the name of your three books and your latest book and how people can find you.
So my first book is Love Untethered, How to Live When Your Child Dies. But the sequel to that, but you can read them both separately, is this one, which is When Grief Takes Everything, A Survival Guide to Devastating Loss. So that's my new book, and which I feel I've sort of obviously grown since the first book. I
Sure.
understand a lot more. My middle book is for wellness practitioners,
Okay.
and it's called Supporting Your Grieving Client. But yeah, and I have two websites, but my author website is vanessamay.co.uk. And you can follow me on Instagram, which is may.wellbeing.griefsupport. So yeah, and I love to hear from people, particularly if you've read my books. I love to hear from you, and connect with people.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for being here today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.